Now, it doesn't matter where you are, like in society. If you're around these tools, you can now show people what you may not have had the ability to in the past.
In the world of technology, heroes are everywhere. They're overcoming disruption, delivering sustainable outcomes, and fearlessly forging the future to solve what's next. Join me, Ed McNamara, as we meet the people and businesses driving change in our constantly disruptive world. This is Innovation Heroes, a podcast brought to you by SHI. Someone, somewhere, is always trying to steal your job. Ever since the first person was paid to deliver a product or service, a second person was there to scare them into realizing that someone or something was going to provide more of that product cheaper or more efficiently than the person who just did it. AI is next in line. AI is stealing jobs. You've probably heard that before. And just like every new technology before it, it's true. But that's not the whole story. AI is also empowering workers in ways that would have been difficult to predict even a few years ago. So that begs the question, how can a tool that's eliminating jobs also be good for your employees? Today we're exploring the often overlooked half of the artificial intelligence debate, how AI supports the most important resource you have at your company, the people who work there, without directly replacing them. AI tools can help employees upskill, innovate, enhance productivity, streamline workflows, and offer personalized assistance. Employees can work smarter, faster, and more confidently than ever before. The shift is transforming roles more than simply replacing them and leading to new opportunities, all of which will hopefully improve employee satisfaction. Here with me today is Geoff Wright, Global Solutions Owner of Gen AI and Digital Experience with Mondelēz International. We're going to talk about how Gen AI and cutting-edge IT tools aren't the doomsday device they've been made out to be. They're doing more to improve employee experience and unlock new skills, all while helping your business's bottom line. Geoff, welcome to Innovation Heroes. It's great to see you again.
It's great to see you, Ed. I'm excited for this opportunity to talk about nerdy stuff.
Awesome. I am as well. So we've talked about nerdy stuff before. You were a speaker on a panel I was moderating at a conference just a few weeks ago. And after the panel, we got to talking about Gen AI. How did you get into using Gen AI in the workplace?
My dad, again, I owe a lot to my dad. My dad was in IT. So the S&P 500, everyone that's familiar with that ticker, right? Even in the early 80s, I had my first desktop, which was an IBM with 2 5.25 floppy drives, like old school.
Right.
So I was always around technology, but to be honest with you, I was always like a people person, like human by design. I always talk about the human element, human by design. We're always talking about IT and like technology and robots and cyborgs. But I was always on like the organic side of things, like the human side of things. And interestingly enough, my dad was always in that same space. He was always around a lot of nerds, but he always found himself in a space like either managing the nerds, and he had these really cool ideas around how do you understand the experience? And this is like, we're talking like in the 90s when people used to still I remember going to the office, people used to still smoke in the office, right? And just 20 guys like creep by a window just smoking, right? And he said something to me once, and I'll never forget. I sat down and my dad said, hey, he was like, I want you to know this. He's like, he would give a guy money and he'd go get a bunch of donuts, random donuts. Mm-hmm. And my dad would come back, he'd put out the donuts to everybody and be like, look, Geoff, he's like, here's how it's going to work. The people that grab plain donuts, the old fashioned, he was like, they're going to be the worst. He's like, the guys that grab the Boston creams, they're going to be loud, but they're going to do their job. And he goes, anybody that grabs anything in between, they're going to be like, like salt of the earth, but whatever. And I sure as hell, I saw these people go into this, like the LAN room, the data center, whatever you want to call it. And the guys that grabbed the Boston creams really were. They were loud. The people that grabbed the plain donuts were the first ones to complain to my father. And to this day, I look back at that because I had that epiphany around there's something missing in this IT experience.
Okay.
Right? But I got into IT. I started managing big teams, but I never really focused on the IT side. I always just focused on my team being like happy and like being well, right? But it's interesting, back in the early 2000s, there was this big disconnect where I always joke, like people were always talking by the water cooler saying like how much IT sucked. But then in the server room, people were always like cheering on, like, dude, we're doing a great job. we closed, we closed 99% of the tickets. I'm like, really? But then you talk to like the random person. They're like, dude, you guys are the worst. Right? And I started getting more exposed to this idea of Gen AI. Like this is when AI started to come into it, where AI could do a great job analyzing like the gaps. And again, this is 2017, way before ChatGPT was really big, like all these things were popping.
Right.
And I started focusing on this experience idea, that where I would say like, okay, so AI can analyze all this data in a spreadsheet, and there's a huge gap. There's something missing in the middle. So I started kind of exploring around this idea of like using, artificial intelligence, machine learning to map out exactly what my team was doing and then what the people were saying. Now we know it as employee sentiment, which is the human element. But then when I got this role at Mondelēz, for people that don't know Mondelēz, I want to be like very, very clear. We're Oreo, we're Sour Patch Kid, we're Tate's, we're Cliff Bar, we're Triscuits, we're Malamars. We're a huge company that's hyper-focused on customers, right? We want to know when we do a Java chip Oreo that it makes you smile just a little bit more like next year as we enhance that recipe. And then I realized with this role, the idea of experience ties into like the artificial or Gen AI piece of it, which is how do you like supercharge or like turbocharge everyone's customer experience internally? That was my role. Like you can, map out like employee sentiment. Imagine if you could have, imagine any company out there right now that has, 5,000, 10,000, 100,000 employees. Imagine if you could find every single person's, all 100,000 people's sentiment about the company, and then find a way to analyze that makes it digestible. That is what I do on a daily basis.
First and foremost, like you are in that great position where you want to use Gen AI to improve the employee experience. You talked about employee sentiment, right? Like, how do you sell that to management? There's so many different ways you could go with that.
So my role when I first took it was not this. But when I go into a role, like I if I find something that I could kind of do, but that's not necessarily my role, like I like to expand. And to this day, there's plenty of people, including my boss, who says, Geoff, you really make this job way more difficult than it needs to be. Like, I'm kind of like in this area where I measure my success sometimes by smiles. And I know that might sound cheesy to most. But for me, if I can get an employee to smile or laugh or understand that what I'm trying to do in IT is there to just, I want people to do their jobs as best as they can with the tools I provide so that they can get done with work and go fishing or hang out in their backyard. If you can get 40 hours worth of work, quote unquote, done in 10, 15, by empowering those people to use Gen AI, we want people that were probably already maxed out or close to it, like most of us are,
right,
and give them a little bit more breathing space so that they're happier employees. I'm not the only guy, at least I pray I'm not the only person looking at, forget millennials, but it's like, Gen Z, Gen Alpha. They want to be able to come to a job where they feel that they're being taken care of, to get done with what they need to do so they can do their own thing. It's very simple. But for me, speech synthesis is probably one of the most incredible use cases for the Gen AI platforms.
Okay. How are you guys using that?
So we use a couple products. We use Synthesia. We use DeepL, which is the underpinnings for Synthesia. But for me, as globular as we are, we have every language you can imagine. I'm sure it's public now. We just purchased a big bakery in China. Mm-hmm. We have, every language. I'm almost positive with every language we have people working for our company. So in this day and age, knowledge management, change management, we're doing a big SAP upgrade, huge SAP upgrade. SAP is obviously German, but it crosses all over the place. And interestingly enough, again, public now, SAP has standardized all of their documentation and all of their knowledge around the Synthesia platform, because they can do one article, they can do it live, they can edit it a little bit and just press a button, and now it advertises and posts in like 122 languages now. I mean,
wow.
That would have taken, Ed, that would have taken months, a year to have people verify languages and find people that speak all these different languages. I mean, all these different like dialects and Portuguese and Brazilian Portuguese, all of them. And for me, what better use case for Gen AI? And I get it, like, not to be like, people are more comfortable and more likely to ingest what they're seeing, right? Through a video with somebody that looks like them, sounds like them. It's part of like psychology, sociology. It's just human nature. But it's nice when people see that we're at least trying as IT to say, hey, we know your first language is not English, right? You're Peruvian, you're Venezuelan, whatever your language is, we have a platform that could at least try. And I think that's all people want to see, is you trying to make them smile, to give them a way to ingest that information easier.
I love the breaking down of borders and kind of the automating of different languages. And clearly automation is the number one benefit from Gen AI. You also have like large creative groups, so in terms of, how do you guys use Gen AI to enhance, creativity? Like, what's an example of like how that works and how, that impacts the sense of well-being and fulfillment at work, like whether it's in a creative position or working with one?
It's the creative process. And I don't believe, there's plenty of people that are too hard on themselves when they're like, oh, I'm not as creative, Geoff. I don't really do that stuff, or I'm not really good with ideas. I believe that with Gen AI, like with large language models, right? The LLMs, whichever one you're using, Gemini or Anthropic or ChatGPT, or Copilot, or in my case, from the super visual creative like Imagen and like Firefly. But what a great way to say, tell me your idea around our products. And I actually had a big conference, or a forum at my office, where I just brought up Firefly, like the Gen AI image generation. And everybody, first, there was one person or two people kind of like raising their hand. They're like, well, like, what if like, there was like a polar bear eating a banana in outer space, right? I'm like, awesome. That's great. By the end of like the meeting, everybody was like trying to give me an idea, right? Didn't matter if you were in marketing or finance or like facilities. Mm-hmm. Didn't matter who you were, at what level of the company, people were starting to unlock their ideas. And whether they're visual or not, it's awesome when you have people that aren't normally in advertising or marketing come to you with these ideas, because even if it's not the best idea, or let's just say it's the worst idea, now you can visualize it and see it like, okay, now, first of all, polar bears don't eat bananas, or why is he on Jupiter? And you're like, and it comes up, and it's awesome to see the reaction of the room. I love big audiences because people are like, they all of a sudden it comes up and they're like, oh, right? You can all of a sudden see this big audience, and we had 100-something people. Just, you have one person come up with a great idea that they can't necessarily paint or envision. It plops it up on this big overhead or a presentation screen, and the entire room now is like, oh my God, that's so cool. And that is an untapped space. That is an untapped part of people's minds that never we had access to until this platform, to say, hey, that guy from facilities? Yeah, the guy that refills the vending machine with pencils. He's the one that came up with that idea. I forgot that movie. What's the Boston janitor that like... Oh,
Good Will Hunting.
Good Will Hunting.
Yeah.
Right? It's kind of like everybody can be Good Will Hunting, because now it doesn't matter where you are, like in society. If you're around these tools, you can now show people what you may not have had the ability to in the past.
Innovation Heroes is proudly produced by SHI, a leading global IT solutions provider dedicated to making life simpler for business and IT professionals. For over 30 years, we've bridged the gap between digital strategy and execution, delivering cutting-edge technology and services to thousands of customers worldwide. Whether you're navigating the cloud, strengthening cybersecurity, or transforming your workplace, SHI is here to help. To learn more, visit shi.com/solvewhat'snext. That's shi.com/solvewhat'snext to embrace the future with stress-free, scalable solutions that you and your people will love. So we talked about communications, we talked about automation, and then learning and development. In terms of, do you have an example of how you're using Gen AI at Mondelēz to do learning and development, like even at a granular level? It doesn't even have to be modular, but even granular on an everyday basis.
So I have gotten into a habit. If you and I were going to have like a session around like, hey, Geoff, I usually use Adobe Acrobat, or I'm trying to do a PDF and I do signatures and I'm trying to do this, I'm trying to do that. And, how does it tie into Teams? I wake up every morning sometimes to 24 Teams chats. I have 63 applications I try to support here. Usually it's something around a specific platform or application, and I'll find one of those people and I'll say, hey man, do you have a minute to show me what's going on? Because I had 7 other people complain that this isn't working the way it's supposed to. I always tell them like, hey, do you mind if I record this? Sure. I record it and I start creating videos and content around those items that are having issues around the world that I see. And what I have seen is a gradual reduction in the amount of people that ping me every morning for stuff that's not working. I mean, I own a platform that tells me how many times people have hard powered off their machine, right? I have a platform that tells me how often people have like done a hard reset or like a reboot or a crash. And that is the challenge. Again, and thank God Gen AI is helping. That's the challenge. How do you know what somebody's experiencing, like at their house, at their home, using the technology stack we've given them? How do you know how to make it better for them without them telling you? Because if somebody's already saying like, Geoff, my laptop keeps catching on fire, you've lost. But we have the ability to at least understand a little bit from a technology standpoint on how good or gooder your experience is. And then we have pop-ups and sentiment that can go up and say, hey, Ed, we noticed your Microsoft Excel crashed like 900 times last week. Is that cool? Are you cool with that? And 9 out of 10 people will say, no, it's not cool.
So, but monitoring that behavior, and it really takes you have to collect a massive amount of information from in your case tens of thousands of employees, right? So, how about speaking to the ethics of it? What ethical issues do you see with using Gen AI in the workplace to monitor like either sentiment or behavior? Like what kind of governance needs to be in place to make sure that it doesn't turn into like a kind of a Big Brother scenario?
Yeah, German Works Council, GDPR, we do deal with that. And again, the data collecting, I mean, a lot of it's voluntary. The endpoints itself, just like Intune or any other endpoint monitoring system, right? There's some things that you have to we don't track location, right? We don't do a lot of that stuff like that. And even if we have to find by office, right? We have like safeguards in place. Like the German Works Council, they go no. And then like GDPR, there's certain things you could do. But the employee sentiment it's 100% voluntary. You get a thing that says, something like, hi, Ed, what is your current experience with the technology stack provided to you? And here's the best part. If you go, it's like, option 1, it's awesome. Thank you. Bye. There's nothing else I want to hear from you. I mean, I personally would want more around that. Like, hey, what are we doing good? If you say not awesome, it kind of pours out into, is it your physical hardware? Is it your physical software? Is it like access? Is it printing? Is it, whatever? Mm-hmm. Because I remember how many people got hammered around Teams performance during COVID. And even now, honestly, right, because they're still working from home, mm-hmm, how many people that were like, oh my God, my Microsoft Teams is running horribly. Video is choppy. My audio is choppy. And then you go, okay, is that a Teams issue? Well, it turns out I was fortunate. We had some cool tools in place where I could go like, hey man, did you know your network is being hammered by Xbox Game Pass and Netflix and whatever? Like, are your kids like, oh yeah, my kids, my wife, everyone's home. Yeah. And then you could even like stress test the network with some of the tools we have to be like, yeah, this isn't a Teams issue. This is a internet provider issue. It was such an empowering moment for me to go, hey, it's not Microsoft Teams. It's not Salesforce. It's not everything you think it is. It's not.
The example you just described there was a perfect intersection of something that is, going to improve employee satisfaction, is also good for the productivity and the bottom line of the company, right? So I think, for what you're tasked with doing, and how do you determine, hey, this is great when these two things intersect, where we just made people feel better about their either ability to do their job, and on the other side, management's thrilled because we see improvement to the bottom line. Like, is that measurable?
Again, sentiment is king. Forrester and Gartner just had like the top 4 things for IT to focus on are not digital experience, but number 5 is. So it's like right there, right? It is right there. And I have to imagine it's, in another decade, how your employee feels, how you are treating them to get their work done that you're asking of them for a reasonable salary, right? So that they can get done with what they need to do to help society and the business to get back to doing what they love outside of the business is going to be, I believe, number 1. I can't imagine, we're all dealing with the same stuff. I talk to people all around the world. It's not unique to the US. It's cultures. It's younger generations, even in the generations that are really hardcore about working harder and doing more stuff, right? Mm-hmm. The younger generations they have a different concept of what it means to be employed and what it means to be working for a great company, right? It used to be like, oh, I worked at IBM and I got a pension and I can work 1,000 years here and like they gave me free coffee in the morning. Yeah, that's not going to cut it anymore. But like the idea of like, how do you protect the worker? And it's like, again, Gen AI, like, oh, it's going to take my job, right? We talked about how it's going to take my job. Yeah, jobs are going since the dawn of time, right? The guy that used to carry branches, right? Oh, the wheel was invented. Yeah, there's your job, buddy. You can't carry twigs anymore because we have a cart with wheels.
Right.
It evolves, but you can protect that worker. And worker protection is how you ensure that they are happy. You focus on them to say, look, hey, yeah, your role, your role refilling the vending machines is now being taken over by Gen AI and robots and robotics. Sorry. But on the other hand, the supply chain, the logistics between those two has not evolved yet. So it's not always like, oh, well, I need to upskill and learn how to fly, a jet. No, but you can sidestep, right? You can sidestep and say, look, I understand that your role might evolve and robotics and Gen AI might take that, but there's plenty of stuff either upstream or downstream from that little chunk in the workflow that you can upskill and learn and do, or try something different, right? Again, only you have the power, but it's like, just change your perception, change your mindset, try to be positive around these things that can help you change.
We are at time, as they say. Just wanted to thank you so much again for being here. For listeners interested in learning more about you or would like to reach out to you directly, what's the best place to find you? How do you like when people reach out?
Well, I'm updating my LinkedIn profile with AI now. So, but yeah, ping me. I get a lot of people that ping me on LinkedIn. I would love to have conversations with other people that have ideas around this, struggle with it, or even like nerd out more with it, because I tell people all the time, it's skill stacks. I'm like the biggest moron when it comes to certain things, right? So like, but when it comes to AI, I'm okay. But there's plenty of people that know more. I know how to make a pretty good omelet. The secret is regaud.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Give it a shot tomorrow.
A little regatta cheese in there. Boom.
Awesome. Well, Geoff, thank you so much. AI will replace jobs, but it won't replace workers. In fact, it can improve the employee experience. It takes repetitive and time-consuming tasks off their plate, enhances creativity, boosts learning and development, all while helping your company make better strategic decisions. A big thank you to Geoff Wright for sharing his insights and expertise. Remember, the decision isn't investing in AI or investing in your workers. Investing in AI is an investment in your employees. Until next time, keep innovating, stay ahead of the curve. For Innovation Heroes and SHI, I'm Ed McNamara, and I'll see you again in 2 weeks.